Hey everyone, this is the book I've just read, The Organized Mind by Daniel Levitin. Sunday Times bestseller, which usually wouldn't make me interested in a book because I don't particularly like the Times or the Sunday Times or any of the Times. They're just propaganda sheets other than the Financial Times. Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload. Absolutely brilliant book and really fascinating. Daniel Levitin, very smart guy, obviously. You can tell that from reading his books. Here we go. Dr. Daniel Levitin has a PhD in psychology, training at Stanford University Medical School and UC Berkeley. He's the author of the #1 bestseller, This Is Your Brain on Music, published in 19 languages. The World in 6 Songs, that in 2008, which hit the bestseller lists in its first week of release. Currently, he is the James McGill Professor of Psychology, Behavioral Neuroscience, and Music at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. I didn't know that, but that reminds me of some of the things in this book, actually. And there's a lot of useful takeaways from this book, which we'll talk about as well. What it reminds me of is he starts off by talking about what he calls HSPs, highly successful people. And two, he talks about, one he doesn't mention by name, it's a friend of his who regularly sells out arenas, stadiums, so a very successful musician, obviously. And then he also talks about a time when he met President Jimmy Carter, and he said, because Jimmy Carter basically had somebody organizing his time, he had assistants and everything else, he didn't worry about any of that. He never looked at a diary for more than a day in advance. And what was really impressive about meeting him was he was yes, I am wearing a Super Dad t-shirt for anybody who noticed. It was a Christmas present. You should always appreciate your Christmas presents. Was that Jimmy Carter, the president, was incredibly present. He was completely engaged in the conversation. He discussed anything for as long as it needed discussing. And then eventually his assistant just showed up and said, right, we have to go now. So he didn't even need to keep track of time. Highly successful person. What Daniel Levitin talks about here is how very successful people, they use the outside world to do what their memory takes a lot of time doing often. And actually, one of the interesting nuggets you'll get from this book is writing. This is going to be a blow for poets and artists. Writing was actually invented in, I can't remember the name of the city, it was Urus it was the first major city. Samaria comes to mind, I might be wrong. And Urus sounds, or it might be Uruk. Uruk is the name. Urus is a car, isn't it? Lamborghini Urus. Anyway, it was invented when people were able to do lots of trade, more trade than ever because of intermingling and traveling, and marketplaces sprung up, and they couldn't remember all the transactions, so they had to write it down. That was the birth of writing. So it was invented to extend a person's memory. And then this book also contains a lot of really interesting talks about how memory is extended. So some of the really smart professors, right, who you might know, people who you think are really smart, really well educated, really good at one thing, but do really dumb stuff as well, like they're always losing stuff, or they and that I was reminded of that reading about this section where people externalize what their memory needs to do. So if you need to buy a carton of milk or a bottle of milk, then you take the empty one and you put it on the passenger seat of your car, so as you're driving the next morning you think, oh yeah, milk. And it's about putting things where they'll remind you to do things. He also talks about the junk drawer. Everyone's got a junk drawer in their house where everything goes, and that's because there's not always a neat category for everything. The problem with a junk drawer I've seen is where people are just too damn lazy to put things away. Everything goes in the junk drawer when it doesn't need to, and then you can't open the damn thing. But it has its place. The junk drawer has its place. Johnny Mitchell, the musician, apparently has a super organized kitchen with hundreds of drawers for everything, so she knows exactly where anything is. It's all kind of set out. The reason is because that allows her to spend more time on creativity and not waste time looking for things. If you've ever been around people who don't put things away or who are disorganized, you'll know how much time and energy and effort you waste looking for things. Like every morning, where's the hairbrush, or basic things, right? And then some of the takeaways from this book. So your brain weighs about 2% of your body weight, probably less because most people are overweight now, right? But it uses 20% of your energy. And actually, a normal brain uses about as much energy as an energy saving light bulb during the day. That's for people whose brains are turned on. Let's say there are some morons out there. So there is actually a cost, an energy cost, a metabolic cost, metabolic cost for everything you do with your brain. This is something that really hit me. That it's a really good takeaway from this book. Okay, multitasking. I've come to the opinion over the last 5 years or so, 10 years maybe, multitasking is a load of bullshit. You can't do it. You can't do two things at once. And if you do, you just do everything crap. And there's lots of research in this book to suggest that's absolutely right. In fact, there's some research to suggest that so-called, I'll tell you why I'm calling it so-called multitasking, is as damaging to your cognitive ability over the long term. No, actually, it's more damaging to your cognitive ability over the long term than smoking pot, smoking cannabis. So just do one thing at once, right? Your brain has a processing power for language of about 120 bytes per second, something like that. And a person speaking to you takes up 60 bytes for them to be understood and for you to engage. That's why usually two people talking to you is the limit. And it's the same with information coming in. Obviously if there's too much information, you're overwhelmed, your brain can't cope with it. Now, when I said multitasking is bullshit, it's because there's no such thing. You can focus on one thing at a time, but what you can do is rapidly switch between what you're focusing on. It seems like multitasking. That's when you burn your arm when you're ironing and you stick the pasta to the pan, which is so damn easy to cook, but then you decide to do something else at the same time and you screwed everything up, right? Switching has a metabolic cost, and that's what's damaging to your ability to actually use your brain properly. It's like brain damage, multitasking. Forget it. Don't even try and do it. All right. And there's so much in this book. I mean, there's a study in here about how false information, decisions based on false information, even when the people who made those decisions are shown that they were misled or that information was false, are influenced by those decisions. And I imagine propagandists know this. So let's say if you're someone like Benjamin Netanyahu, he'll go out and say, oh, we're Santa Claus and we're the most moral people on earth, and the IDF plants flowers whilst they're committing massacres over there and bombing hospitals over there, and then you say to the world, oh, we've been trying desperately to get aid into Gaza, and then you turn around and you say in Hebrew, we're going to flatten Gaza, we're going to turn it into a parking lot, we're going to take over, and you think people don't realize. And then you have idiots like the media, or even, who's that fucking, who's in charge of the states now? Joe Biden, Genocide Joe, who comes, I never thought I'd see pictures of beheaded babies. That's because you didn't, you dumb lying fuck. You're just repeating a lie that was put out by Netanyahu and his propagandists. And later, even the White House had to come out and say, oh, we have to retract that statement. And there's never been any evidence of the 400 babies, or 40 babies beheaded, baked, and turned into cakes and eaten by these monstrous Palestinians, terrorists. And it's all been shown to be false. But the fact is, people who believed it in the first place are still going to be influenced by that. So there's a study in here that actually demonstrates that. It's an old study, and it would never pass any kind of political correctness test now. So basically, students at university were taken in to look at different women, different naked pictures from Playboy magazine or something, and they were told that their heartbeat would be monitored and played back to them. So what the it's crazy, isn't it? Imagine this study. So what the experimenters did is they sped up the heartbeat to give the suggestion that people were more aroused when looking at certain pictures. And so at the end of the study, the participants, the subjects, were told, actually, your heartbeat wasn't really your heartbeat, we were just playing it back to you, and it was all fake. And so now knowing that, which of these Playboy models do you find most attractive? They all stuck to their original answers, and those kind of findings have been replicated again and again and again. But there's so much I could talk about in this book. It's absolutely brilliant. Let me read you the back, right? Even the smartest mind can't beat the organized mind. In the digital age, we are overwhelmed by information, unable to make sense of it all. Our creativity plummets and decision-making suffers. Daniel Levitin shows us how we got here and why smart organizations improve our memory why smart organization, improves our memory, our attention span, and even our imagination. You'll discover that. Your brain has a daily processing limit. Why waste it on cat photos? Very good point. Daydreaming is your brain at its most productive. It's really good to just do nothing sometimes. It really is. People like Einstein, famous composers, famous writers, the ideas that came to them whilst they were just daydreaming, doing nothing, were some of their best ideas. You know, it's your brain needs to bum around and do nothing occasionally. Make time for that. Multitasking is a bad way to do nearly everything. The organized mind will teach you to function better, go further, and find more time to do things you actually want to do. Thought-provoking and practical. Good advice based on sound neuroscientific principles. Sunday Times. Sensible practical advice. A comprehensive account of the way we think about organizing everything from our possessions to our friends. Financial Times. Woo! Financial Times. Deservedly a bestseller. Said in a very serious voice. Independent. Levitin is as knowledgeable a guide to neuroscience as one might hope for. The New York Times Book Review. Jolly good. Okay, great book, brilliant book. There's more I could talk about on it, but I don't like these to be more than about 10 minutes, and it's already 11 minutes. There was some more stuff I was going to say, but look, really good book. I recommend everybody read it. I'll give it a 10 out of 10 for that. It's pitched just at the right level where you feel like, wow, I'm learning so much. And it's useful stuff. I'm not just learning about random stuff that I can actually implement. Yes, so it's definitely a 10 out of 10. Highly recommended. I'll tell you what, look, this is the book I'm going to read next, so there will be a review on this as well. This is On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. I hope I said that right. Out of date this, I started reading it today, and they're talking about Israel carpet bombing Gaza in 2009. So, what's happening today is nothing new. Today, by the way, for those who don't know, is the 19th of January 2024, just over 100 days into Israel's latest war on Gaza and its inhabitants. Anyway, so that will be the next one. That's the one I just reviewed. Focus on one thing at a time and read the book.